Every single data set tells a story. But a lot of the time, that story's kind of written in code. It's a mystery, locked away in all those rows and columns. So today, we're going to put on our detective hats and learn how to crack the case, to uncover the secrets hidden right there in the data. And this is really the central question for any data detective, isn't it? We always start with this messy, raw evidence, just a jumble of facts and figures. And our mission is to somehow transform that chaos into a clear, compelling insight. So how do we get from the crime scene to the conclusion? Well, the secret is having a reliable method. It's not magic, it's a systematic investigation. We're about to walk through the 10 crucial steps that every good data detective follows, turning all those little clues into a solid case. But first things first, let's define our primary tool for this whole investigation. What exactly is statistical analysis anyway? Okay, so it's a formal process. And the key words you really want to focus on here are systematic and goal. Think about it. A detective doesn't just wander around a crime scene hoping to trip over something. No, they inspect, they clean, they analyze evidence with one single purpose: to find useful information that leads to a breakthrough. Every great detective story starts not with a piece of evidence, but with a really compelling question. And in data analysis, it is exactly the same. So the investigation officially kicks off right here with two foundational steps. Step 1 is defining your mission. What exactly are you trying to solve? And step 2 is gathering your clues, the data you're going to use to solve it. Now, step 1 is probably the single most important part of this entire process: defining the problem. This question becomes your North Star for the whole investigation. It's what keeps you from getting lost, from collecting a bunch of irrelevant clues, and it makes sure you're focused on solving the right mystery from the very beginning. So once you know your question, it's time to gather the evidence. And this can come from pretty much anywhere. You might conduct surveys or run some controlled experiments, make observations out in the field, or hey, even use data that someone else has already collected. The method you choose really depends on the mystery you're trying to solve. Okay, so now we have our box of evidence, but just like in a real case, it's probably messy, right? Disorganized. And it's going to need some serious work before it starts making any sense at all. And this brings us to step 3, which is one of the most vital transformations in our investigation. Raw data is just messy. It's full of errors, missing pieces, kind of like unreliable testimony. Data cleaning is what turns that chaos into a stack of clean, consistent, and trustworthy evidence. Trust me, skipping this step is a fatal error. It's like building your entire case on a lie. All right, with our evidence now clean and reliable, we can move on to step 4. Taking our first proper look. This is called exploratory data analysis, or EDA for short, and it's where we start looking for those initial patterns, suspects, and leads. Think of EDA as like the first sweep of the crime scene. You're just getting a feel for the evidence. You'll run some summary stats to get the basic facts, and you'll create charts to visualize the scene, looking for anything that seems out of place. Strange patterns, outliers, or some suspicious relationships. This is where you find your first real leads. Sometimes even clean evidence isn't quite ready for the lab. So step 5, data transformation, is all about getting it into the right format. For instance, you might need to convert qualitative clues, like a yes or a no, into numbers so our forensic tools can actually analyze them. Okay, so our evidence is organized, our initial leads are identified. Now it's time to move from just exploring to actually making an accusation. This is where we formally build our case and start testing our theories. This is step 6, and we do it by setting up two competing theories, kind of like in a courtroom. The null hypothesis is basically the presumption of innocence, the idea that nothing interesting is happening here. The alternate hypothesis, on the other hand, is the prosecution's case. It's your theory, the one you're trying to prove. The whole goal is to see if your evidence is strong enough to overturn that default assumption. So for step 7, how do you test these theories? Well, with statistical tests. Think of them as the specific forensic tools of the data detective. A t-test checks if two groups are meaningfully different. A chi-square test sees if two variables are related. A ANOVA is kind of like a t-test but for more than two groups. And a regression helps you predict a future outcome. Each one of these tests if the patterns you're seeing are real or if they're just random chance. So after you run your test, you get the results back from the lab. This is the moment of truth. Step 8, interpretation. Is the evidence strong enough to reject that presumption of innocence? Does it actually support your claim? Or does the default assumption still stand? So you've done the analysis. The test results are in. But guess what? The job isn't done. An unsolved case is useless, and so is an uncommunicated analysis. It's time to tell the story you found. The final steps are really all about closing the case. Step 9 is where you draw your conclusion, officially answering your original research question based on all the evidence. Then, for step 10, you write it all down, documenting your process and preparing the final report that's going to share the truth.
And please, never forget this. The analysis itself is just a tool. The real value, the thing that truly matters, lies in the report, in the story you tell. That's how you communicate the truth you worked so hard to find, and it's how you ensure your discovery actually makes an impact.
So, there you have it, the data detective's complete process from start to finish. You start with a clear question. You gather and meticulously clean your evidence. You explore it for clues, form a testable theory, and finally, you present your findings and tell the data's story. Every single dataset has a story just waiting to be told. Now that you've got the detective's manual, the only question left is, what case are you going to solve first?